Hi, and welcome to this episode of Disaster Empire Quick Views. This time I am very excited to have David Trout with us, who's currently with Raytheon. I just want to, before we jump in, remind the audience to please like and subscribe because that helps grow the channel. But first, I'm going to punt it over to David to talk a little bit about his background before we jump in. Welcome, David.
Hey, Ashley. So good to see you after, I think this has been like almost 20 years for us.
I know.
So
Too long.
Ashley we've worked together with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts going back to 2003, I think. And you were with the Department of Mental Health, and I was with the Department of Public Health, and both working disaster response, disaster recovery, in a brand new program with the state post 9/11, and really getting not only bioterrorism response up and running and public health preparedness up and running, but also, dealing with some of the behavioral health aspects that are in and around that. So fantastic to see you again after, gosh, it
Same
feels
here.
like the last 2 or 3 years. We've all had our heads down, working nights, weekends, just dealing with COVID. So a little bit about me. And again, I gave you a little bit there with Ashley and my background with the state. But my start in resilience actually got started a few years earlier than that with the Massachusetts Water Resources Authority. When 9/11 happened, I was working in process improvement and became the go-to person to start working on security issues and other light preparedness issues that the agency was just dipping its toes into at that time. So the transition over to the Department of Public Health was a natural one, where I got more involved in preparedness and spent 11 years with the state there, and then transitioned to Raytheon about 8 years ago, and I've been working in the private sector and their resiliency program ever since. So glad to be here, glad to share my knowledge and experience both in the public and private sectors, and really, this is a great platform just to share ideas and begin and continue discussions around resiliency.
Thank you for that, David. Hey, do you have a fun fact that you want to share with the audience or that people might not know about you?
So my fun fact, and those close to me will know this, is I am a musicologist. So if you start talking about any music, 60s, 70s, 80s, maybe into the 90s, I could probably tell you the artist, the album, the songs. I can even get into what was going on in the artist's head and why they wrote that song, what they wrote it about, who played on the album. I've got some friends in the industry who actually said, "Oh, do you know so-and-so?" I'm like, "Oh, no, I just read liner notes, autobiographies, and just soak up any knowledge I can about music." So
that's impressive. So I would definitely take you to a trivia night, right? For music.
Absolutely.
Thank you. That's great. Well, hey, one of the reasons that I really wanted to have you on and share your experience with the audience was that experience on the public side. So I wanted to talk a little bit today about the transition that you made from, working on the public side. So if you could talk a little bit about that when you were with DPH, with the Regional Emergency Preparedness Group, as you talked about, a lot of that grant funding came from after 9/11, concerns about bioterrorism and really helping our public health infrastructure to get prepared for that particular event and anything else that might happen.
Yeah, that was just a very formative time in my career. Again, I spent 11 years with the Department of Public Health, Office of Emergency Preparedness, And really, it gave me my first exposure to public health. And I made a lot of good friends there, public health directors, nurses, sanitarians. Um, and really, they weren't just colleagues, they were friends. And I worked with 50 communities divided up into 5 subregions. And we worked on response planning and response plans. We did threat assessments. We did exercises and drills, all kinds of great stuff. And really, the hallmark of that time was the introduction to traditional public safety, and beginning to work and collaborate with law enforcement and fire and emergency medical services, and of course, behavioral health and all the health related fields that encompass a response. So it was a very unique role as a regional emergency preparedness coordinator. It was a hybrid planning and response role. So not only did I find myself at weekly meetings with different groups on the North Shore, the Merrimack Valley, Mystic Valley, and other areas, but when something happened, something of significance, I would find myself in the Operations Emergency Center as the state liaison, relating information and receiving information, and that key, node of communication for the state. So very, very unique role. And as you well know, we activated to receive some of the folks from Hurricane Katrina from New Orleans down at Otis Air Force Base. And, that was a good example of, our two agencies working very well together to get folks in, to make sure that they had the medications and things that they needed to survive, to give them housing, to give them food, and obviously to take care of their behavioral health needs. So yeah, it was, you just never knew on any given day, what was going to happen, from the Danvers explosion up, I think it was the Liberty Marina at that time. And, being at that emergency operations center, trying to relocate all those folks from the home for the deaf up there. And again, just monitoring the situation and taking care of folks. And of course, the biggie, when we were working the medical tents at the 2013 Boston Marathon, just a day that if you weren't in preparedness, or if you were, it really marked the beginning of something different. And I've got very vivid memories of that day.
Sure.
Yeah. And I'll just summarize it this way, that I was the typical employee who always took Patriots Day off. I grew up as a runner, long distance runner, and I loved to watch the race. So I didn't want to be out working. I always took the state holiday, but that was the first year I decided, you know what, I'll work the day.
Oh, wow.
And I'll take the floating holiday at some later point. And, memories of a perfect day, perfect weather day, my job of, basically receiving overheated runners into a medical tent. Really, we had a handful of folks, but it was a perfect running day. And then at 250, that all changed.
Yeah.
Our medical director got a page, and then he was gone. And then we started getting pictures, not close-up pictures, but, pictures far away from the finish line from folks from Cataldo Emergency Medical Services. And we knew something was up. It was just more than what we thought were, gas eruptions or manhole covers
Yeah.
somehow blowing off their top. And again, being asked to walk out, I was at Heartbreak Hill to stop the race.
No.
I
Wow.
mean, amazing.
Yeah.
And incredible. I've run the race before, never thought I would be asked to
That
stop the race.
situation. Yeah.
And then, probably the most indelible pictures that I still have in my mind of once we got folks safe and briefed them on what was going on and got them to shelter, it was deserted.
Mm.
And all as you saw up and down that whole, Commonwealth Avenue in that area was police assets you did not know existed.
Yeah.
Doing sweeps, going 70 miles an hour up and down, Route 9, Commonwealth Avenue into Boston. And the place was deserted. So again, that hybrid role really, it just wasn't one of those, well, I'm the planner and I'm from the state and I'm here to help.
Right.
It really was boots on the ground,
Yeah.
response, communication, and really, getting my hands more in to response and how to work with law enforcement, fire, EMS, and other first responders, more so than any other traditional planning role.
Thank you for sharing that story, because I think a lot of folks on the private side who haven't come from public side or law enforcement don't really have a sense of that. And I think there still probably isn't a great understanding, and not that there needs to be. But I always think of part of the reason I feel like things weren't even worse on that day was because of the work that had been done consistently, and the collaboration between public health and the hospital systems and law enforcement to really support that event. And I feel like, help got to where it needed to quicker because you guys were already there. Like no one had to get there, so to speak, because you were already in place or primed and ready to support that event. And behind the scenes, it had been an exercise, right, yearly of assets. And, just want to thank you for your contributions on that day, because it certainly was, as amazingly devastating for Massachusetts and for the city of Boston and all of those runners and their families. So, just thank you so much for sharing that perspective. Can you share a bit, David, about how you parlayed that experience and those skills into your work at Raytheon? Because I don't think any of us, had a sense that when we moved into the private sector, we would be dealing with, a worldwide pandemic.
Yeah. So I joined Raytheon in 2014, and ironically, I used to pass Raytheon on my way to Tewksbury Hospital, where I was stationed for the state. And I always had heard about it, admired it as a company and as a place to work. My father had a few friends that worked there. He also worked for a company that made components for some of their products. So I always thought that would be a good next step. And the power of networking was I got to meet Matt Russell at one of our professional organizational meetings. And he was already working there, and kind of struck up a little bit of a relationship with him. And it wasn't too long after that the position became available. And I just reached out to Matt, and turns out he was leaving to go to State Street. His colleague had left. And so the two guys who were doing the preparedness program, as it was known then at Raytheon, were turning over. So 100% turnover. So myself and Mike Callanan came in, and Mike was a guy who spent 23 years in the Marines as a colonel. And he was Mattis's logistics guy in Iraq. One of the best leaders you'll ever meet. one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet, will help you with anything, and just a tremendous human being. And again, I'll just say that I feel fortunate and honored, to work with him and have worked with him for these past years at Raytheon. We've learned a lot from each other. He spent some time at the Pentagon doing federal planning. And so I came from the state doing state planning. So you had two public sector guys coming in to a private company. And I almost liken Raytheon to almost quasi-public, because we are a federal contractor. We are held to certain government standards. And so there was a lot that wasn't different. There was a lot that was. And, again, we spent the last 8 years building that program and maturing it. And it all paid off with COVID and what happened in the last 2.5 years. But, the good things that we brought were a knowledge of incident command and how that works, not only in a response, but also in getting things done. As they tell you in ICS 100, it's a collapsible thing that expands and contracts depending on the size of the event. So, and I remember the instructor's words, I think it might've been Don Carlton, names from the past.
Yes, names from the past.
So, whether you're planning a birthday party or whether you're planning a disaster response, you've got, planning, logistics, operations, and finance and administration. And you can put people into those buckets, or if it's a small event, you take them on yourself and do multiple roles. So again, we brought that in as sort of a framework in how to accomplish things and get things done, inside the company. And, I have to give credit to the guys that brought us on, Steve Scherstedt, who was our director of infrastructure and site leader and director of the original program, and Brad Duffin, his boss, who was director of facilities. They really, after showing us the ropes and teaching us a little bit about Raytheon, they really let us kind of build the program as we saw fit. Mike, who had done 4 deployments over in Iraq and Afghanistan, recognized the need to build and mature more of our international program. And he jumped into that head first and has done a tremendous job doing that. My interest and expertise really fell along the lines of, go figure, the weather and active assailant, active shooter stuff. I brought us Storm Ready certification after a few years. And it just means, that the National Weather Service thinks or has vetted us as an organization that is prepared for any kind of weather event or natural event, that we have systems and communication and things in place to be able to know when that's coming and communicate that out to our sites. But the other thing we did that was leading, I think, in the industry was active shooter. Our security organization owns that, but as sort of one of the exercise planners, they pulled me in as a subject matter expert to just make sure that we plan things out right, that we could do these safely and securely without creating a business disruption. And we were able to do that to the point where by the time right before COVID, we had gotten sign off from our VP of HR and security to do 2 full-scale exercises at each of our domestic sites each year. And that's a big deal, bringing in, lights and sirens, law enforcement, fire, EMS, and really doing a full-blown active shooter response and recovery. So, again, we were really given a lot of freedom and just the ability to take the program in the direction that we wanted to, based on the interests that we had, and focus on those things that we liked and we felt were very important. So a lot of that public sector experience in planning, exercise planning, evaluation, after action reports, all the things that we did carried over. And actually, I still do them to this day. All those activities I did on a regional basis in the Northeast part of Massachusetts, I still do for my sites, not only domestically, but also internationally. So it's just a lot of the same skills. And I think that's one of the reasons that I got hired and it was so fast, quick, and easy, is my role was very similar. It was a very similar role of, going from regional oversight to more domestic and international oversight.
Just expanding the scope and the scale.
Yeah.
And thank you for sharing that. We will share the weather readiness in a link below when this goes live. But also thank you for sharing, that journey that you took for yourself and with the program. How did you translate that program? And you said it sounds like you really had the ability to kind of refresh and maybe update, make new, so to speak, because of that turnover that you had in staff and coming in as a newer team. And now you're branded as a resilience program. Can you talk a little bit about what that means for you, what that means for Raytheon?
Yeah, it's after we came out of COVID, that's really when the rebranding started. And, just to give folks a little bit of background. So not only did we jump into COVID, back in 2020, but we merged with United Technologies only a few months after COVID started, and we all went home to work remotely. And really, it was a merger of equals. And if just to give folks a little bit more background, United Technologies was a company that included Pratt and Whitney aircraft engines, Collins Aerospace, which if you fly on a plane, any of those interiors and parts of the cockpit are made by Collins. It also had Otis elevators and Carrier heating, ventilating, and air conditioning.
Yeah.
So
impressive.
Yeah. So what they did is to make us a traditional aerospace and defense company, they spun off Otis elevators and Carrier HVAC. And on our side, we merged. We had 4 businesses. We merged integrated defense systems and missile systems. It became Raytheon Missiles and Defense. And we merged space and airborne systems and intelligence and information services, and that became Raytheon Intelligence and Services.
Okay.
So we're still 4 businesses underneath the Raytheon Technologies banner, and we're still undergoing all kinds of rapid change and evolving to where we are going to end up. But it's been an interesting journey, and part of that has been not only a rebranding of, from preparedness to resiliency. But at the same time, we've gone from typical mission areas and functions to a product-based organization. Talk about changing your business impact analysis.
Yeah, definitely.
So again, we are going through rapid transformation as we speak.
Okay.
And, I think we'll come out just great on the other side of it. but the resiliency rebranding really is an opportunity to bring Pratt and Whitney and Collins kind of into the fold of preparedness. They typically did crisis management and security and did that really well. They did that excellently. Again, I think they not only brought some lessons learned and best practices for us, but that was just their real focus on things. We do more business continuity, preparedness program, and that side of it. So we've kind of brought them into that, and they've, helped out on crisis management and things like that. And so it's been a cross-pollination of all the organizations, and the folks that are a part of that team are just great people. They're dedicated, they're committed, and it's as we're in these uncertain times, not only COVID, but a war in Europe, tensions in Asia Pacific. This is a job that if you're not geopolitically aware or astute, you need to be. You need to understand what is going on around the world, the decisions that leaders from different countries are making, and what's happening on the ground there. And again, I'll always want to be helpful. If you don't subscribe to the Early Bird, look it up. It comes out from, I believe it originates from the Department of Defense, and it basically captures some of our military decisions and actions worldwide, but it also in that captures a lot of geopolitical things that are going on, and it's free. Yeah, that's a great resource. And if you can pay for a resource, I highly recommend stratfor.com. Great geopolitical awareness, articles, forecasting, what you can expect in different areas of the world going forward. Tremendous analysis. So again, another hint for folks, just to begin your day with a primer on, okay, where are we this morning and what's going on, and in the week, month, year ahead, what am I looking at when I've got sites in Europe, in Asia Pacific, in the Middle East, North Africa region, because you're always trying to, in this field, as stay ahead of the curve.
Yeah.
We can't predict disasters, and we don't know what's going to happen next. But again, we do need to be prepared. So the resiliency really, it's not just preparedness under environmental health and safety or security or digital technology on the cyber side, or it's across the entire organization. It's we're in operations. Yeah. And so one of the things we're discussing right now is the energy crisis over in Europe, and how
it's a big concern.
Yeah, shutting down of sabotage of the Nord Stream pipeline is going to affect not only Europe, not only our sites, but our people that work at those sites, who are in homes that need to be heated. Yeah. What can we do for them? What are we able to do for them? What should be our expectations in terms of operational continuity? What adjustments do we need to make? So that's a big area of focus right now. Again, you really need to be tied into every little thing that's happening in all these different countries throughout the world. So resiliency is a bigger term. It's like a global term. It's a whole organization or a holistic organizational term, and it spans all your functions and all your either mission areas or product-based organization. So it's a bigger thing than just, I have a preparedness program. Yeah. We have plans. We do exercises. We do threat assessments. And, we do audits. Everyone does audits.
Yeah. The compliance aspect, right? Thank you so much for sharing that. It's really great to get that perspective. And I agree with you that risk intelligence and that horizon scanning is so key to the work that we're doing in today's environment. Because like you said, you can't just have your head in the sand and only look at one aspect. We're really being asked as practitioners to have that more holistic view. Thank you for the mention of the resources. We'll link to those below as well. As we wrap up, I'd love to continue this conversation. But as we wrap up today, can you share anything else with this audience you think they might be interested in to know?
I'll say this, that the three-letter word that everyone dislikes, BIA, business impact analysis, because what it means is a lot of resources, a lot of work, a lot of conversations. It's a really important part of what you do, not only to learn your organization, to learn what's important to your functions, HR, finance, security, contracts, everything. You start to learn, what are non-negotiables for them in terms of, if things stop working, I can't stop doing this.
Right.
Or these dates are important, but they're only important for quarterly financial reporting.
Right.
You start to learn the intricacies and the details of how a business operates. And the conversations are time consuming, but they're really interesting. And I think that it's one of my favorite parts of doing what I do. And it's really two things. It's learning about the business and the industry and what's important, and what can't break, or if it does break, how do we fix it? And especially as a government contractor with classified areas and, people walking around with top secret clearances, confidential clearances. Okay, what can we move to just a regular warehouse to do? And what is something that can only be done in a secure area, that has been vetted by, the federal government and certified as a closed classified area. So fantastic conversations and very, very interesting. And I just, I just encourage people to just jump in with that and start having those conversations, start building those relationships. It really is a good way to get to know 2 or 3 people in each function or organization. You really do grow your network, and you start to understand, your company and how it does business and what's important and maybe what isn't as important. So there's that. And then the other thing that I love, exercises. And I had wanted to do, and it's in the back of my mind, to do a presentation at one of the major conferences, and I was going to title it "Exercises That Don't Suck." Yeah. And really, again, starting off with the end in mind, what do you want to accomplish in terms of what vulnerabilities do you want to highlight? What gaps do you want to expose in whatever scenario you're developing? And then, working with other subject matter experts to put together a plausible scenario. I like to do mine in real time, today, not 6 months from today. Today, what can we talk about? What can we speak of? And what can we address today? What do we know today? those are very, very helpful. We have done, we do them every year, but we've done a couple of those that have been game changers. One in particular where it reaffirmed an investment in our Pelham, New Hampshire test site of, on the upwards of $40 million to redevelop that site and keep it operational. And there was some question as to whether things would continue there. And we came in with an exercise that showed business leadership, how valuable that site was. And, it's just, if you can do a good exercise, and a good exercise means your leaders don't have the answers. You've stumped them. They look at you and say, I don't know. I have some work to go back to do and find out. That's a good exercise. Not everyone knows the answers. You've flipped the scenario to 2 or 3 key people. You've got questions and plans. Everything goes fine. After an hour, it's done. Everyone walks away and says, boy, we did a great job. Yeah. It's the opposite. That's why we're here. We are here to build the resilience of our organizations. And the only way to do that is to explore, investigate, and find out where those gaps, where those weak points, where those failure points are. So again, I just want to encourage people in those 2 aspects. They're not always fun, but go figure. They're the things that I love the most and the things that I enjoy the most. So, and with that, again, I also, anyone who ever wants to reach out to me on LinkedIn, ask a question, whatever it is, happy to always help, and happy to lend my knowledge and expertise in whatever humble way I can to just help people out.
Thank you, David. Really appreciate that. And I want to thank the audience as well for being here today. And again, to David for sharing your knowledge and your expertise with all of our peers. So we really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.